Dwight D. Eisenhower was one of the most powerful men in the world, Supreme Commander of the Allied forces in World War II, and the 34th President of the United States. But while history remembers him for D-Day and the Cold War, his family life was marked by profound tragedy and quiet legacy. Today, we're diving into the lives of his two sons, John Eisenhower, who lived a life of duty, diplomacy, and deep historical insight, and Dwight Eisenhower, lovingly called Icky, whose brief life left a permanent scar on his famous father. What happened to them? Number 2. Dwight Icky Eisenhower. Dwight Eisenhower was born on September 24, 1917, in the infirmary at Fort Sam Houston, Texas. At the time, his father Dwight was a young captain in the U.S. Army, posted far from home training soldiers in trench warfare. Dowd's birth was healthy and smooth, and his mother Mamie was thrilled to welcome their first child. She nicknamed him Little Ike, which quickly became Icky. For the first few months, Ike didn't even meet his son. He was stationed at Fort Oglethorpe in Georgia, and by the time he saw Dowd for the first time, right after Christmas, Mamie herself was sick with pneumonia. For months at a time, Ike would be absent, chasing assignments while Mamie and Icky stayed with family in Denver. By 1918, after the armistice ended World War I, Ike was transferred to Fort Meade, Maryland. But again, housing was a problem. So Mamie and Icky returned to Denver, where Mamie's family helped raise him. When the family finally reunited in 1920, they created what felt like their first real home. Ike had been allocated an old wartime barracks at Fort Meade. They fixed it up and made it livable. Icky turned 3 that year, and his charm made him a favorite among the troops. The soldiers even made him a miniature uniform and called him the mascot of the Corps. Dwight Eisenhower later wrote that he'd never been prouder. He'd show off his son at every opportunity. Mamie was beaming. This was the happiest the family had been, but it didn't last. On Christmas Eve 1920, Icky fell sick, scarlet fever. At the time, there was no treatment. The little boy was quarantined. Mamie got sick too, and on the morning of January 2nd, 1921, with Mamie still recovering, Ike was alone when Icky died in his arms. Ike would later say, "This was the greatest disappointment and disaster in my life, the one I have never been able to forget completely." Icky was buried in Denver in the Dowd family plot. But in 1966, Eisenhower, then aging and in poor health, had his son reinterred at the Eisenhower Presidential Library in Abilene, Kansas. Today, Icky lies beside his parents in a quiet white chapel, a symbol of a life short but deeply remembered. Number 1. John Eisenhower. When John Sheldon Dowd Eisenhower was born on August 3, 1922, the Eisenhowers were still grieving the loss of Icky. He was born in Denver, Colorado, while Ike was stationed in Panama. Because of concerns about health care in the tropics, Mamie chose to stay with her parents for the delivery. Growing up as a military child meant John's life was one of constant change. The family bounced from post to post: France, Washington, D.C., the Philippines. When Ike was deployed to the Philippines, Mamie and John stayed behind so he could finish 8th grade in the U.S. Eventually, they joined Ike overseas, and John graduated from the Bishop Brent School in Baguio. In 1941, on the edge of global war, John entered West Point. He and his classmates trained knowing full well that they'd graduate into battle. They were the class of 1944, but due to the urgency of World War II, their graduation was moved up to June 6, 1944, the same day as D-Day. While his father was leading the largest amphibious invasion in history, John was receiving his officer's commission. John wanted to lead an infantry platoon. He wanted to serve like every other soldier. But it wasn't that simple. What if Ike's only living son was killed? Or worse, captured? Those fears kept John off the front lines. He spent the war in administrative and intelligence roles in England and Germany. In 1947, he married Barbara Thompson, daughter of Colonel Percy Thompson. Together they had 4 children: David, Anne, Susan, and Mary. Yes, that David. The one who would eventually marry Julie Nixon, the daughter of Richard Nixon. After World War II, John earned a master's degree in English literature from Columbia University and returned to West Point to teach. But duty called again. During the Korean War, he returned to active combat, this time as a frontline officer. Meanwhile, his father was campaigning for president. The timing? Awkward. John wrote years later that during this time, he and Ike had a serious conversation. If John was captured, he couldn't allow himself to be used as leverage. He was to take his own life. That's how serious the stakes were. John stayed in the Army through the 1950s. During the Eisenhower presidency, he worked behind the scenes, as Assistant Staff Secretary on the General Staff, and as a special assistant to Ike's closest aide, General Andrew Goodpaster. In 1958, John bought property near the Eisenhower farm in Gettysburg so his kids could be near their grandparents. He retired from active service in 1963, but continued in the reserves, eventually reaching the rank of Brigadier General. Then came his diplomatic career. In 1969, Richard Nixon, now his daughter-in-law's father, appointed John U.S. Ambassador to Belgium. He served until 1971, earning praise for his steady hand and deep military insight. He later worked under Gerald Ford as chairman of the President's Advisory Committee on Refugees. And throughout the 1970s and 80s, he took on other behind-the-scenes government roles, especially relating to military classification and veterans affairs. John was more than a soldier and diplomat. He was a writer, and a very good one. His books include The Bitter Woods, 1969, a study of the Battle of the Bulge, So Far from God, 1989, a deep dive into the Mexican-American War, Yanks, 2001, focused on American participation in World War II Strictly Personal, 1974, a memoir about his life with his father. He also wrote biographies, essays, and was a respected voice in military history circles. His tone was clear, reflective, and even self-critical. He didn't romanticize war, he tried to understand it. John also stayed politically active, in a quiet, thoughtful way. He didn't chase attention, but he occasionally published op-eds and interviews, particularly warning against American overreach in foreign conflicts. In his later years, he continued writing, speaking, and engaging with historians. He was often asked to reflect on the legacy of his father, and though he admired Ike greatly, he was always quick to remind people, "My father was not perfect." John Eisenhower passed away in December 2013 at age 91 at his home in Trapa, Maryland. He was buried at West Point, where his military journey began. Full circle. One lived a short life that changed the course of his parents forever. The other lived a long life of service.